December 19th, Planning Commission meeting for the town of Truckee. Kaylee, can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Claren?
Here.
Vice Chair Gove?
Here.
Commissioner Freeman?
Here.
Commissioner Taylor?
Here.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Here.
Don't we usually say the Pledge of Allegiance? I don't see it. I don't have an item 3 on my green chart. What was that? Pledge of Allegiance. That would be next, right? So, all right. So who'd like to lead us? Martin, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. To the flag of the United States of America. To the republic for which the nation indivisible. Thank you, Martin. Public comment. So this is an opportunity for the public to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda this evening. If anybody has a comment that is not on the agenda, you have 3 minutes. Don't all rush up at once. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comments. Item number 5, approval of minutes. 5.1 is September 27th. I believe myself and Coral have to abstain from voting because we were absent that day.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. 5.2, October 17th, 2023 minutes, regular meeting. Vice Chair Gove and Coral Kavanaugh again were absent. Must abstain from voting, so I need a motion from one of the remaining commissioners, please.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Dan.
I'll second.
Thank you, Sammy. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Motion passes 3-0. Item 5.3, November 21st, 2023 minutes.
I have a minor wording change.
And Commissioner Freeman was absent, and Coral has a minor change, you said?
A minor wording change. Page 4 of 13, second line on the page, should read, they're basically like underground bioretention, period. It will be amended soil and gravel rather than is mended soil and gravel. All remaining picky things I usually convey will be conveyed elsewhere.
And with that, can we have a motion for an amended minutes, please?
I do. I move that with the one amendment to the minutes, that we accept the minutes from November 21st.
Thank you, Coral. Any second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sammy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Item number 6, public hearings, minor review. Item 6.1 is application 2023-15 MMAMDZC, which is 11118 Trails End Recorded Map Modification, Project Amendment, and Zoning Clearance. I believe Laura's got a staff presentation for us.
I do. Good evening, everyone. I'll give you a quick summary of the project. The applicant is requesting modifications to the previous approvals for Lot 5 of the Pioneer Commerce Center Phase 3 subdivision. The original approvals were a tentative map and plan development back in 2005. That included some restrictions on lots 4 through 9 because those lots are within the scenic corridor. So there were some specific standards about height and setbacks. Commission review is required for future development projects. And then there was a prohibition on outdoor retail storage and activity areas. Then when the map was recorded later in 2005, those restrictions were included on the map. A temporary contractor's yard was approved on the site in 2010. And that approval has expired. And the applicant is now seeking approvals to establish a permanent use on the property. So the entitlements that they're requesting this evening are a recorded map modification to modify the notes on the recorded subdivision map, a project amendment to remove the restriction on outdoor uses on Lot 5, and a zoning clearance to establish a permanent contractor's yard use. The Planning Commission's role tonight is to review these changes. For changes to an approved project, those have to be reviewed by the original review authority, which was the Planning Commission. And then in addition, changes to a parcel or final map have to go back to the original review authority. So that is why you are the review authority this evening. And in addition to that, the zoning clearance is wrapped in with the other approvals. There's an overview of the project site, Trails End. The zoning's manufacturing, and the land use designation in the general plan is industrial. A little bit more on the background. When the project was approved in 2005, that included 16 industrial parcels, which were to be sold to individual owners. And lots 4 through 9, as you can see in the diagram there, were the ones that backed onto the scenic corridor. And the applicant's property is shown in yellow there, lot 5. Then in May 2010, there was an application to remove some of the limitations and a certificate of map correction to modify the notes on the map. And that allowed for some outdoor storage on the lots. The Planning Commission initially denied the zoning clearance request to have a contractor's yard without a building. That decision was appealed to the council, which basically sent it back to Planning Commission. They saw some merit in having an outdoor storage yard due to the fact that there's a shortage of those types of properties in town. So ultimately, it was approved with a 5-year approval and an option to extend. And as part of that, they had to do some additional landscaping, berming, and fencing, including a solid wood fence along the I-80 side of the property. So the owner got building permits and began operating the contractor's yard in November 2010. Then in 2011, they came in to add a tow yard use to the site, and that was also approved within the same 5-year time frame. Then in 2015, there was a time extension to extend both of those approvals, and once that expired, then the uses continued to operate, so there was a code case, and then this application is intended to remedy the code case and get them a permanent approval for the project. So the modifications tonight for Lot 5 would be to modify those original restrictions in the approval and on the final map, and then approve the zoning clearance to allow a permanent outdoor construction contractor's yard. The applicant's justifications for why they think that the use should be allowed to continue permanently, they believe that the mandate to construct a building that was originally required doesn't serve the town's needs with respect to providing affordable space for small construction industrial users that really just need space to store equipment and construction materials. The owner's not interested in building a building at this time due to the cost of construction, uncertainty of the economy, impacts to his existing tenants that would cause. And he believes that the screening, landscaping, and fencing that was installed for the temporary contractor's yard meets the scenic corridor standards, and that nothing would be gained by requiring a building to be constructed since the screening is already in place at this point. So in reviewing this request, we looked at a number of different aspects of the project, the history of the subdivision, the types of development we've seen since that time over the years, the feedback from council and the commission, our current standards and general plan policies, and then what we see as the ongoing community needs for different types of industrial spaces. And we've came to the conclusion that the original prohibition on outdoor uses was really based on aesthetic impacts. And that was where the requirement to construct a building originally came from. And while we still see value in constructing buildings because there is a need for that for manufacturing uses in Truckee, we do know that a lot of businesses have struggled to find locations for this type of contractor's yard. So we see that there's still a current need for that type of use. So this is just a little more detail on each of those approvals, which we can refer back to if we need to. In terms of general plan consistency, like I said, it's industrial zoning. There's a number of policies in the 2040 general plan that talk about ensuring adequate industrial land, encouraging entrepreneurship and local business ownership, supporting retention of businesses that provide residents serving goods and services. So we believe it's consistent with those policies. And then in terms of development code consistency, there are a few different standards that we recommended conditions related to One was the scenic corridor requirements. So there was additional screening that was required as part of the original temporary use, the berms, landscaping, and fencing, and that wood fence on the back of the property. In terms of landscaping, they were required to do the enhanced landscaping at that time. That's now mature landscaping, so we're not requiring additional landscaping to be installed, but we did include a condition requiring it to be maintained in terms of the landscaping and irrigation. For screening, with the original approval, only a solid wood fence was approved or required on the back of the property. But on the sides, there was some fencing that you can see in the picture on the left there that's kind of warped, and our current standards would require a solid fence or wall. So we are recommending a condition of approval to bring the other fencing on the property into compliance with our current standards for fencing for outdoor storage areas. No exterior lighting is proposed, so we just included a condition that if any is proposed in the future, it would have to meet those standards in the code and be approved by the community development director. There were no solid waste requirements for the original contractor's yard. We currently do have some standards for these types of uses, so we recommended a condition to provide those minimum services. And then we don't have a parking demand that's for this type of use in the development code, so we just require that the employee parking has to be on the site, on a paved area, and then employee parking can't be in the right-of-way, and then limiting the use of vehicle storage on the site to equipment and vehicles that are used as part of the contractor business. The engineering division provided some comments on the original project that were talked about in the staff report. Those were all addressed with the exception of the trail location. So in reviewing this application, the engineering division noticed that the trail that was constructed on the property as part of previous requirements wasn't in the pedestrian access easement. So they've recommended a condition of approval to remedy that either by dedicating some additional access easement or relocating the trail to the correct location. For environmental review, we're recommending the use of an exemption from CEQA. That's section 15301 of the CEQA guidelines, which is existing facilities. And that applies to projects that have a negligible or no expansion of existing or former use. So in summary, we really looked at this in terms of what was approved on a temporary basis previously, the fact that it's in an industrial subdivision, that the issues related to aesthetics have been addressed with the previous approvals. We think that there's still a need for this type of use and that making this use permanent wouldn't create any new aesthetic impacts than what we've seen over the years with this site. We think that they successfully worked with the Planning Commission to address those concerns with the 2010 approval. And we did propose some conditions of approval to bring the project into compliance with our current standards. So our recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2023-21, which is determining the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15301 and approving the recorded map modification, project amendment, and zoning clearance subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Commission could also choose to take an alternate action, which could be continuing the hearing. You could add, delete, or modify any of the conditions of approval. You could approve the project or deny the project that on the basis that the findings can't be made, or you could require additional environmental review. And if you choose to take action tonight, the appeal period would end at 5 p.m. December 29th. So I'm happy to take any questions. We also have Bill Wisnell here on behalf of the applicant team, who's also available for any questions.
Any questions, anyone? Dan?
I have a staff question, or it might be an applicant question, but I'm curious on the trail. Who built the trail originally?
So I believe it was Ciro built that as part of the Pioneer Commerce Center. Is that right, Scott?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so it was built as part of the Pioneer Trail subdivision, likely by Ciro Mancuso. So he was to my understanding, he was the previous property owner before Jensen. So.
And no one checked that when it was built, that it was in the right place.
So at the time, when subdivisions are built and there's some public improvements are built, our current practice is to approve as-built conditions and to confirm that happened. We don't have record of that happening at that time, so it was built. It's a slight portion of the trail that's kind of extended outside the public access easement. So it's functioning currently, and so it just needs to be cleaned up as part of the project.
So, but it's either move it or increase the size of the easement, right?
That's correct. Either option will work for the town.
And Bill, do you know, I guess you have to stand up here. The trail's outside the fence, isn't it? I mean, it wouldn't, if they increase the size of the easement, it doesn't really have an impact.
It's part of the no-build, 50-foot no-build zone anyway, so it doesn't have an effect on the existing storm drain system or the existing screening wall or anything like that.
Got it.
So it doesn't affect that, no.
Okay.
It looks like they were trying to save the trees around it. That's what it looks like.
There's a couple of 32 or 34-inch pines, and so they went around those. So, it's a tough call. I personally don't believe that Mr. Jensen should be responsible for cleaning up this because he had no part of it, but the town engineering department feels otherwise, and so we'll see where it goes. But they do have two options. We can cut down the trees and realign the path, or spend the money on a surveyor and create more easement. So it's up to Mr. Jensen to decide how he wants to address that condition.
What if we didn't have that condition? What would happen?
We consulted with the town attorney. He recommends that we clean this up as part of the project. Currently, there's public use of a piece of private property outside of a public access easement. There's some type of allowable use that the public has because it was constructed there. But the cleanest way is to clean it up now as part of a project that's moving forward. So the recommendation is to move forward with having it be either relocated or have an access easement that fully encompasses the trail.
Okay, only question.
I'm just wondering if it's a public trail, then why wouldn't the public be paying to fix the mistake that wasn't corrected in the first place? Any reason for that?
So the trail, the way that it was originally designed, the entire trail was located inside the public access easement that was there. Right. It was constructed not per plan, and it wasn't confirmed that it was fully within an access easement or on public property prior to acceptance. The remedy to that is typically the property owner is the responsible party to remedy the situation.
We'll get back to that. Any other questions for staff?
Yeah.
Bill, do you have a presentation? Okay. Go ahead.
Coral's got one as well, but do we have a diagram of the existing trail and its proximity to the easements and what is the offending part of the trail?
Can you zoom in a little, Laura, please? Yeah, perfect. So kind of on the bottom corner there, the south corner of it, you can see the trail kind of comes from the northeast down along the property line. It's all within the public access easement there. The access easement's it's the first 20 feet. So from property line to the edge of the access easement is 20 feet. It's the utility and pedestrian easement. So the trail stays within the pedestrian easement all the way until it gets close to those 36-inch pine trees, which Bill just pointed out. And then it jogs towards kind of the northwest to go around the pine trees. And then it's probably about 8 feet outside of the easement there on that south corner of the property. So the two options, one, if Mr. Jensen doesn't want to provide an additional easement, would be to cut down the trees and keep it within the pedestrian easement, or identify and dedicate a new sliver of pedestrian easement there just to encompass that full portion of the trail.
Is there any way to accomplish providing that extra sliver of easement without
Mike?
the applicant having to pay a new, having to pay a surveyor for a new survey?
The alternative to that would be probably at the town engineer's discretion to determine if we wanted to use public dollars to pay for the town surveyor to write up an easement, a plat and legal for the easement area, that then Mr. Jensen could sign the offer for. That's a potential option that could be recommended by Planning Commission to the town engineer.
Coral, any other questions?
I had one more quick one. Bill, can you give us a back of the napkin engineer's estimate for what that costs to survey and record an easement?
Well, I almost would defer to my friend Mr. Wood, who is a surveyor, but
Engineer's choice.
yeah, I would suggest that probably by the time we did, I don't think Kurt did, Sageline Surveying did the original survey, so, and that's who would do the exhibit, and so he would have to come out, physically locate that in the field, set up, tie into the property corners, and establish it. So I think we could spend, by the time you did that field work, you could spend $1,500, I would expect. I mean, that's just shotgun, but expect $1,500 by the time you got done with all the documentation and recording with Nevada County and signatures and going through the town engineer or town surveyor for review. That'd be just my guess.
At minimum, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's double that, personally. I was thinking 3 to.
So Mr. Wood said if it's record information, $1,500. If it was field work, $2,200 or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking
Yeah,
3 to 5.
But that's half of the process. I mean, there's still all the other coordinating that needs to be done. Right? Anyway, so that's deliberation.
Right.
Worthy of deliberation.
Right. So, Sammy, any questions?
No, mine have been addressed.
Dave?
I mean, I don't think Dan's question got answered. The question was, what happens if we don't do anything? And the answer came back, this is how we came to the conclusion. We spoke to the attorney, yada, yada, yada. And maybe that's a deliberation point, but I'm curious to know what happens if nothing is done and the path just stays there and people just go around the tree.
If we didn't get an answer to that, could we get a speculation on that or an answer on that from staff?
Sure, I'll provide a little speculation on that. So then the public would continue to utilize a trail that's located on private property outside of a public access easement where they don't have established rights to utilize that. And then it would be, if there was ever a challenge, it would have to be challenged in a court to determine the public's legal use of the trail on a private property outside of an easement. So the town attorney's perspective is that the best way to clean this up so that it's all in a legal public access easement is to do it now. Not to say that there isn't some type of right for the public to utilize the trail, whether it be a prescriptive easement or other method, but that would have to be determined by a court of law as opposed to an easement that clearly outlines what the public's usability of that is.
And just to add to what Scott said, our understanding is that there will need to be a survey for the grading permit due to the location of the improvements in relation to the property lines, that they're really close. So that's likely going to be required anyway as part of the grading permit. And secondly, there could be some liability for the property owner in terms of having the trail outside the access easement on their own property. So that might be another consideration for them.
And so, I'm going to open to public comment, then we can finish deliberating, all right?
On this section project amendment, allowing future zoning clearance approvals for Lot 5 to be processed at the staff level consistent with the town's ministerial process for zoning clearances. This happened pretty often. Is it likely to happen for the other lots in this, if they're converted this way, or if they became these uses?
Yeah, I mean, it's unusual for a zoning clearance to come to the planning commission. That's something that a previous commission wanted to see happen. But we're comfortable reviewing these at the staff level. It's a much more streamlined process, and we do a lot of zoning clearances. If the other property owners along this section wanted to ask for a similar modification, they can come to that as well, if you ultimately approve it tonight.
Somewhere in the presentation, Laura, I saw things that were going to change for lots 4 through 9. So my question was just that. What's being asked of us for specifically Lot 5, and what is being included on all 6 lots?
So originally, we were looking at updating the notes related to all of the properties, but that would have required all of the property owners to participate in the process. And ultimately, Mr. Jensen decided to move forward with just his lot because that was simpler. So anything that you change tonight will only be specific to Lot 5, and that would be allowing the outdoor contractor's yard use without a building and updating the notes on the map that currently prohibit that.
And just on Lot 5, not on the other 5 lots?
Correct.
Okay.
One last question. Do we have a position from Mr. Jensen on whether he's willing to pay for this public easement modification?
It might be a bill question.
Let's take a guess.
Commissioner Gove, as I mentioned earlier, Aaron and I have talked about this a lot, and we understand the differences between the two options. And I asked engineering to write that in the option of realigning or providing the easement. I don't know that he's decided which way he would go. I do believe, as Mr. Mahat mentioned, there is some language in the California code that this path has been there for almost 20 years. And so there is some prescriptive easement right to do that. And if Mr. Jensen decided that or had some reservation about granting the easement, I don't know that that would get very far when it really got into the court of law. Certainly not an attorney or a surveyor. But I think that the idea of the easement, granting an easement to the town would probably be where this goes. I just don't know that for sure.
Thank you. I'm done.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to open up to public comment. If anybody has a comment on this particular item, please step up to the podium, state your name. You have 3 minutes to speak. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and move on to deliberations. Anybody else? Is there any other comments about anything else here? The fence was something I kind of have a question on. The requirement to upgrade the fence.
Are we deliberating?
Yes.
I also had some questions on the fence. I did drive by there before the meeting. The fence is pretty beat up. It looked worse in person than the photos, and I didn't realize it was all 3 sides. But I wonder if the applicant, it is also the only chain link fence out there, which I thought there was more. So I was wondering if it's possible for the applicant to repair the fence. A wood fence would look nice there. I just, it was funny because I was reading the staff report, and on page 7, talks about the general plan, 2040 plan, and economic policy 2.2, encourage entrepreneurship and local business ownership. And that's what we're holding this project standard to. And it doesn't feel like some of these things do either of those things. I kind of feel like they add undue cost to someone who's trying to run a business. So my thought was give them the option to replace the chain link, repair the chain link to a certain standard, though I know that we don't have a standard because it's not allowed.
Right.
How long would it take for the new chain link or the repaired chain to end up looking like the one?
No, for sure. I mean, 10 years. That's how long it's been there.
And wooden fences wear out too.
Sure.
It's not, we keep thinking wood is this magic material. It's not. I started taking pictures of signs in town that are all worn out that have to be wood. So, personally, comments? Sammy, that's right up your alley.
I mean, I don't necessarily have any strong opinions about the material. I also drove by. It is beat up. Like, it does not look good. So I think something should be done. If it's not wood, do you have another material in mind?
Not in this particular case, no. I'm not a fan of chain link either. Dave?
I mean, I see both sides of the argument, right? I mean, small business, it's tough to, I mean, what do you think a wood fence like that costs anymore? $25,000?
More than that.
More than that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably
Right.
60, 70.
Yeah. I mean, that's not an insignificant amount of money.
Plus you got to pave the lot. Right? Because it needs to be fully paved. Wasn't that in the staff report?
No,
Yeah.
I thought it was just the
Yeah.
parking spots.
Yeah.
No, it's fully paved.
Fully paved, right?
Yep, that's correct. Anywhere where you're driving vehicles or storing equipment has to be paved per the state stormwater permit.
So in regards to the fence, playing devil's advocate to Dan's comment about encouraging entrepreneurialism, it's great for the fence builder.
And the supplier too, for that matter.
For the what's the cost comparison for
The worst things are
new
the
chain link
trees.
fence or repairing the chain link fence? What's the cost difference between that and the new wood fence?
10x at least, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah, I would say 2/3.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if the fence would be 60
repairing.
grand,
I don't know. I've never done a chain link fence project, but repairing an existing chain link fence.
It's 373 feet of fence.
Okay,
It's a lot
You're
of
going to
fence.
do that for $2,500? I don't think so.
1,000.
25,000.
You said the wood fence would be about 25,000, and then you said that was 10
He said
times
70.
70. Oh, okay.
I mean, I guess the thing that we're fleshing out here is that we're not fence experts, but we all know that we all know that this is going to cost the applicant either a bunch of money or a whole bunch of money.
It needs to provide visual screening. That's what the fence needs to accomplish. It's an industrial area, which may not require something truly aesthetically superior. So I don't know that I would come down hard on having to say it has to be a wood fence, because it's going to be, you just have to not see what's going on the lot. That's the idea. You're on the trail, you're on the interstate, you're driving on Trail's End, you might see a pile or a piece of equipment, but that's the objective of the fence, along with security, I presume.
Bill, has Aaron, and have you discussed the fence with Aaron?
We have, as you can imagine. And there's no question that wood fence is a very or maybe not an appropriate product for snow country, as you can drive around town and see that. When this originally was approved, slatted chain link was there. And since that time, the development code has prohibited that. And Aaron and I have talked about that and explained that because the project is expired, we have to meet the new development code rules. Clearly, he understands all of the magnitude of the cost of the paving, additional storm drain infrastructure because the design standards have changed since this was originally installed, paving the entire lot because grindings are no longer allowed for surfacing. And he recognizes that. He has 3 tenants that he wants to be able to keep there, but we've definitely had discussion about what it's going to take to bring this into compliance with the 51 conditions that are on this little simple permit. And what that might mean for his tenants. So the answer is yes, we've done that. He knows that the condition says it has to be either, well, it says wood, but there are some other materials that are allowed by the development code for fence and for screening of contractors' yards when you do storage. That's what this really starts to be. And he knows that. He told me that he really wants to make this yard work for his tenants and keep it there. So he was going to try and figure out a way to make it happen. But he does recognize that the cost of all these improvements is significant, and it's going to have to affect his tenants. We've had that discussion many times.
Just to add to Bill's point, so the actual requirement in the development code is for a solid site obscuring masonry wall or metal or wood fence. So if the commission wants to give some more options to the property owner, we recommended wood just because that's what was already constructed at the rear of the property. But if you wanted to add some additional language to that condition for them to look into some other materials and see if there's a less expensive option.
But metal fence doesn't include cyclone fencing.
No, it has to be a solid fence.
So I'm okay with the wood fence. I mean, it will be nice. It'll be a very nice industrial yard. All the other properties there do have wood fences. His neighbor's going to benefit if they ever build something because the fence will already be up on one side. And again, what else are you going to put there that meets the requirement, also serves the need?
We're gonna put CMU. That's
Totally.
Sammy, any comments?
No, I mean, it seems like the applicant is aware that this is a requirement and he's moving forward ahead, moving forward knowing that.
Okay.
I have another item.
Huh?
I have another one.
Shoot it. Bring it up, Dan.
The parking requirement, that applicant cannot park a boat or an RV. There can only park a vehicle that is a piece of equipment or a work vehicle. Are we going to now monitor if he buys a travel trailer for a job site trailer that's a work item and he can't park that there? Or if he's got a lake job and has a boat? I mean, do we get into that?
it's a
Can't-
personal vehicle. It's a job site trailer.
Who's going to monitor that? Check the registration and see who's the item is registered to? Like, can he park whatever he wants? If he wants to park, how about a motorcycle? How about an ATV? How about a snowmobile? Seriously, like,
Well, it's all personal vehicles.
Is it,
And
though?
you're looking at me, I won't be checking.
Yeah, but do you own a motorcycle?
Excuse me?
Do you own a motorcycle?
I own more than one motorcycle.
So that is something that we've required for other contractors' yards so that it's limited to the contractor's yard use and not personal storage of vehicles, which is a different use.
So I didn't like that condition.
Noted. Anything else?
I agreed with the trash. It sounds like he's gonna have basic trash service. And exterior lighting. How about porta potty? Are we gonna govern that? Can you have a porta potty there?
No, I mean, we require, if there's a bathroom, for it to be connected to sewer under our current requirements. They haven't had one for the past 13 years there, and it doesn't seem as though they've expressed a need for that.
That's it.
Thank you. Let's go this way. Sam, you have any questions, comments?
No, but I remember what was the first topic that I feel like we didn't come to a resolution on. Oh, right. Go for it.
I'm not a land use attorney, but I think that's a prescriptive easement at this point. If it's been there for 20 years and the public's been using it, I think that's established.
Yeah, you'd have to go through the court process, though, to make it legal.
Like I said, not a land use attorney.
Right.
But I don't know. I just think, just let sleeping dogs lie. Just leave the trail there. Move on. Remove that.
Coral?
I do think that's kind of a liability for the owner. Again, also not an attorney. It doesn't seem like I don't feel like we can leave it alone. if there's going to be a survey done on this site for the grading anyway, it should be able to incorporate the cost of,
Can't that be his choice?
I hate to see those trees go. That's what it is. They're two big pines. You can see on the picture in the,
I know the pines.
yeah. They're-
Yeah,
they're
I've been
nice
on that
trees.
section of path many times.
Me too.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, be it his choice if he wants to take on the, if he feels that that's his liability, that somebody's going to slip on and fall and then sue him, he can take on the cost of having the easement changed
Or he can remove the trees and move the trail.
or leave the trail and just forget about it and not do either.
Only if we don't include that condition.
That's what we're saying.
That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Or if he's going to get a survey, Bill, is he going to get a survey for the grading permit? Is that where we're at with this? I mean, I'm looking at a survey right now.
There's a condition that says that there has to be a survey before the improvements are made. I suggested that that's not necessary because the improvements are already there. The engineering department feels that it's necessary because of the proximity to the property line. I was out there the other day and found all four or three of the four corners. And so what I was going to suggest to the staff is that just like normal builders, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's three of them here. If you can show with the building official where the corners are and string it, then a topographic survey is not necessary because the grading that's going to be done is strictly for paving. All of the berm, all of the stormwater pond, all of that stays, and so any grading that's going to happen is minimal with base, just to make it all slope correctly. So that is a permit condition, no doubt about it. And Laura and I talked about it, and engineering department thinks it's necessary. I didn't bring it up, but even if we have to do a topographic survey to establish where the boundary is, because that's what the engineering department's nervous about or concerned about, is that the improvements be located on the property. Fair enough. I wasn't going to have them topo the whole thing because there's no improvements being done in the back. And that does not negate the need to write an easement, my understanding, to write an easement with bearings and distances for this little change in the alignment of the trail. So yes, there is some field scale, or where those two things can be done, but that doesn't negate the need for the surveyor to prepare a legal description and an exhibit and get that recorded.
So what is this that we're looking at right now? Is that not a survey?
So that is a site plan that my office put together based on the 2010 improvements, and then when the berming was built, we added the berm, showed that contour information, showed the fence, and then because the storm drain design standards, have increased, then I've added additional stormwater infrastructure to this drawing. So this is a conglomeration of drawings since starting in 2010, but the original improvements were done based on field survey and our base topo. So again, that's why I don't think it's necessary. I know what that condition is. I don't think it's necessary to do the entire lot. All I was going to do, again, based on my conversation with Laura, was establish where the side property lines are so that we make sure that any improvements when they repave it or whatever they do with the fence do not encroach on the existing or adjacent property. That was how I was going to solve that condition of approval.
I'll just chime in. I think engineer, we could be on board with that as well. We want to confirm that the property corner pins are reestablished because they can move over time, especially with it being a contractor's yard out there. So at minimum, reestablishing the property corner so that everything is built on the properties. And then at that time, if the surveyor is going out there to reestablish those pins, if they grab shots of where the trail is, that could assist in that. Bill and I also discussed you could potentially do a kind of an office survey of this, of using because there's bearings and distances for the property line on all four sides. You could just offset another 10 feet of that existing pedestrian easement and just do a plat and legal for that in the office with no field work. So that's an option. Could trim a couple $1,000 off of it based on Martin and Bill's kind of napkin estimate. That's also an option.
I think that's what I was going to suggest, because if this is an accepted lot plan, it's got the bearings and things on it, and if you just made this southern corner, southwestern corner, southern corner really, if you just made sure that the easement is generous enough to accommodate the trail, overshoot it by a couple of feet, provided that the applicant finds that acceptable, you could do a verbal description of that to establish it. And if we could just say that, that might make it a little more cost efficient.
We left the wording of that condition pretty open to be flexible on how the applicant wanted to move forward with it to still meet all the requirements of the engineering division. So
Is that acceptable?
You mean, is it legal or is it acceptable? I
No,
think
I
just say,
specifically said acceptable.
it is to me, if you could just say, well, leave the trail where it is.
Yep.
And make the easement a little bigger by just describing it, because we know the bearings down here and your approximate distance, and make the distance big enough, and then add a little rectangular flag, I guess, to that easement. I don't know how to word that in a condition. We could use some help with that, but that's what I would suggest, because that could really make it a lot simpler. And doesn't require much more action than saying, yes,
Dave, Dan?
I think that's a great idea.
I agree.
So we're gonna need help writing that, I guess, or coming up with verbiage for that. All right, where are we with the fence?
Now I'm leaning towards a wood fence. If it's common in that neighborhood and it matches the other sides, and there isn't another solid material that would make sense there, why would we permit the chain link in this lot and not on the others? That doesn't seem like a good road to go down. So I'd lean toward the wood.
I feel like we explored it, and I would agree that, yeah, just go with staff's recommendation on the wood.
Yeah, I agree with both of those approaches.
So then the only condition I'm hearing, well, I guess two of them would be the survey, the specific survey, and then the easement verbiage would need to be changed.
One minor wording change to condition 12. The hours should be listed as from X to Y, not from X and Y. Thanks. Clarity?
Yeah, I'll fix that.
Parking? No motorcycles?
I think that's a pretty common requirement for commercial properties, to not have personal
Okay.
vehicles on it. Anybody else with that?
I won't have any place to park my van.
I mean, I get the point, but, without anybody to police it, what does it matter, right?
Well, this is a code compliance case, so we have people to.
Good point.
He could build a building and then put it in the building.
And if you can put a storage container, fill that full of personal vehicles.
There you go. Technically, no, but nobody would know, right? So,
Can we make a motion?
yes.
We need help crafting the wording for the trail.
Could we, so condition 19, proposed condition 19, so it provides flexibility for it to be accomplished in a number of different ways, limited but not including, or not restrictive of just being a field determined survey. It just says that an additional public access easement will need to be offered by the property owner to the town so that the entirety of the public trail is located within the public access easement. Doesn't say how it's offered, how it's determined the meets and bounds of it, just that it's provided by the property owner to the town and accepted. So I think that the language is flexible enough to allow for the office survey. Let me know if we could provide like a parentheses, Could be field survey, could be office survey, but I think it's flexible enough to allow for that.
I'm reading it, and Scott's right. It doesn't say specifically how. An additional PAE will need to be offered by the property owner to the town.
As long as there isn't some additional assurance that we need to write in that it can be accomplished by the method that you said.
I mean, as long as it's stamped by a licensed surveyor and it fully encompasses the trail, it'll be accepted by the town. And then we'll handle the recordation with Nevada County too, so there's not even a cost there on the applicant.
Bill, is that what you heard? Is that?
I mean, the idea of making it larger than it needs to be so that the bases are covered. I can't make that commitment that Aaron is gonna
Right.
grant more easement area from his property that he'll no longer be able to use than is absolutely necessary for the trail. So I understand the reasoning, but I just can't say that that is going to be acceptable to Mr. Jensen. And then even if we do say that it's, it's an office survey, and I understand what the intent is. Still have to prepare an exhibit. You still have to write a legal description, and I appreciate the town getting that going to the expense of recording it. But the permit condition says that has to offer. Doesn't say, but my interpretation of that language says that it's up to Mr. Jensen to have all the survey work, whatever that survey work does, whatever that means by paperwork and field work. It just says it has to offer. If all he had to do was offer, and somebody else be responsible for generating the paperwork signed by the stamped by the licensed surveyor, I don't think we'd be having this discussion. But I think the way that my interpretation in talking to Scott has always been that it's up to Mr. Jensen to do all the paperwork other than recordation, and that's what has been a little bit of a sticking point. That's really, I think, what it is. So the oversize, I mean, I understand the reasoning, but I can't say that he would agree to provide more area just to eliminate the cost when he's basically giving up property into perpetuity. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not answering your question, but it's.
I got confused. So what'd you call it? An office survey?
Sure, desk survey, office survey, something where you're not going
That
out in the
still
field.
needs a stamped survey?
It needs a plat map and legal description, which is a typical document that accompany an easement offer. And then the town prepares the offer. It's a one-page offer that's recorded with the county. That those exhibits are attached to the offer, and then an acceptance by the town. So what the applicant would need to prepare is the plat map and legal description of the meets and bounds of the additional public access easement area, which, again, if it's done in the office, all the information is on the site plan that you're looking at that would need to be written by a licensed surveyor that then's provided by the town. So there is work that needs to be done by the applicant. Another option that maybe the planning commission would feel comfortable with, you could provide a recommendation to the town engineer that recommending the town engineer utilize the town surveyor and public funds to kind of facilitate that plat map and legal description being created that he could take into consideration.
And it does have merit. Do they need a survey for the grading permit?
They need to, at minimum, establish where the property corners are so that they can string it so that their asphalt that they're proposing, I think, of 2 feet off of the property line on the west side is somewhere on the property. And then as well on the east side of the property, that's a drainage easement that also the improvements need to stay out of that. So those two constricting bounds, they need to confirm that they're building everything on their property. So at minimum, they need to establish the property corner pins and string the property lines, which is a type of survey.
I think the engineering suggestion that we recommend that the town take on the burden of managing that portion of the dedication of that property for the path is a good recommendation.
Do we just say if we did that, would we just accept the conditions and then add,
We would make an amended,
we would add a recommendation?
Yes.
That's a different thing than a condition.
You could modify the condition language to include a sentence that says planning commission recommends exactly that.
Okay. Planning commission.
Dan?
Works for me.
Sammy?
That's fine. I guess I have one follow-up question for staff then. Would this like set a precedent for how we would handle any easement issues in the future moving forward? Would it become a town or public funded fix versus the property owner?
Potentially. I mean, that's why the initial direction is, per the California code, when we discuss it with the town attorney, there is justification for the property owner to pay for it. So that's why the direction there is that they should provide those, the costs to prepare the documents. And so staff's intent there was to not set a precedent moving forward.
I mean, I understand the merit of both of those options. I don't know how many, and I don't know if you guys know this off the top of your head, how many kind of instances of this easement access issue exist in town?
We try to limit them.
are you aware of any others?
There was one instance at the end of Trails End, so Lot 9, I believe, that was recently is under construction right now, where a similar condition was found where the trail was outside the easement, and the property owner voluntarily moved the trail into the easement because they felt that was an appropriate measure.
Well, part of the reason they chose to move it on that property though was because they were using that area for snow storage where the trail was. So then they moved it into the easement so that they could continue to use that other area of the property.
I mean, I'll just add that you'd be making a recommendation in this case, and it's ultimately the town engineer's discretion to either set a potential precedent or not.
Right. All right. So, and all the other issues with this have been settled between the five of us, right? So I think it's time for a motion. If somebody wants to make that.
I think that a motion depends on whether or not we're including a recommendation. I don't know if we are. I don't think we've agreed on that yet. Or a recommendation's not binding.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just a recommendation, then we can put it forward. If they choose to use it, that's out of our hands. But I think it provides more flexibility, but also allows for, legal discretion at that point if they need to talk to the city attorney again to see what makes the most sense ultimately for this situation.
Does it create any unnecessarily delays? Okay.
If the commission recommends the town engineer to pick up the cost and the town engineer says no, then what?
Then it would be on the property owner.
Just put back on the property owner. If we just remove the condition of approval, then the property owner can decide whether or not he is concerned about liability and can make choose his destiny that way. But that's just my opinion. And if nobody else is on board with that, then I'm happy
I think
to.
it's a valid option worth considering. I don't like the idea of leaving it this way because it's messy. And it's public trail. That is an option.
It does clean it up in perpetuity. So in 10, 20, 50 years, when somebody else owns that property and goes to build a building there or does whatever, hanging out there. You get Sierra to pay for it. Did they buy it from Sierra? I mean, they go back to title company. I'm sure there's title insurance. they would have a claim. What title insurance is for. Make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2023-21, amended as such that we recommend to the engineering department that they bear the cost for the easement modification for the trail.
I'll second that.
Chair Claren,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. All right, item 6.2, application number 2023-121, EXT Village of Grace Crossing Time Extension number 2. This presentation is brought to you by Yumi.
Good evening. We're here to talk about the Village at Grace Crossing time extension. Just to give you a quick overview of the project site, there's actually, since the last time extension and the original project, 36 new parcels were created out of the 15 old parcels, and the project site is located along 89 North between the two roundabouts, across the street from Freshman Hollow and north of Hennis Flats. The Grace Crossings, Village at Grace Crossing is within the Village Center District of the Grace Crossing Specific Plan. It's also identified as neighborhood commercial as a zoning district, and it's within the Grace Crossing Specific Plan area of the general plan. And this is subject to the 2040 general plan. Originally in August 2019, this project was approved for approximately 83,000 square feet hotel, which has 129 rooms, a 5,000 square foot conference center, approximately 17,000 square feet of commercial with 21 residential units above. That's within 5 buildings. 24 attached single-family residential units called the townhomes, 1 fourplex, and 270 parking spaces, a sign program, landscaping berm along 89 North, a bus turnout, and a tentative map to create large land divisions as well as condominiums for the mixed-use buildings and the fourplex. And since it is a fairly large project, the applicants were not able to complete the project within the 2-year time limits of the original permit, and a 2-year time extension was requested in November 2021 and approved by the Planning Commission. So today, since it is still a very big project, they are asking for a second 2-year time extension for the following. This is for the original development permit, for the tentative map, and the comprehensive design program, which I detailed in the previous slide. So Planning Commission's role tonight is to determine if the applicants have made a good faith effort to exercise the permits and to ensure consistency with any changes to the general plan, specific plan, and development code. We're not reviewing the merits of the project tonight. In order to approve the extension, the Planning Commission has to make the following 4 findings: that the permittee has made a good faith effort to exercise the permit and has exercised due diligence in seeking to establish the permit. The land use permit and approved use are in compliance with all of our all of our policies and standards. There are no new changes to the character of the site that affect the consistency with the regulatory documents, and there are no changes to the capacity of community resources. So in order to make the finding for number 1, and showing that the applicants have exercised due diligence, they have completed the public improvements, the trail and the road. Jake's Way has been constructed between where the townhomes are located. They've obtained an easement for the bus pullout on Hennis Road, or they provided an easement. They recorded the final map for the land division, so not the condominiums yet, but just the land division. They obtained building permits for all 24 townhomes, completed construction on 3 of them, and with a number of other townhomes under construction, mostly on the east side of Jake's Way. They've obtained building permits for the fourplex, which is currently under construction, and submitted building permits for the mixed-use buildings, which are largely ready for issuance pending the construction season. To make the finding for number 2, which ensures consistency with all of our standards, staff is recommending 1 new condition to address some changes to our development code since the 2-year time extension, where all utility agencies with an interest in the easements on the project must consent that required site improvements like landscaping or parking will be allowed to remain in perpetuity. So there's a lot of easements on the property that encompass the required landscaping and the parking. So the applicants have already worked on obtaining this consent agreement from all of the required utilities. So that's one condition that we're applying to address the recent development code changes. And then there have been no changes to the Grace Crossing specific plan that we need to address tonight. And with the 2040 general plan adopted in May 2023, which this extension is under, while there's a new general plan, the general plan didn't change the Grace Crossing specific plan or its implementation. It specifically says to just implement the Grace Crossing specific plan. So no real changes have been made based on the 2040 general plan implementation or adoption. And then to make the findings for number 3 and number 4, staff has found that there are no changes to the site except those completed by the applicant to exercise their permits, and no changes to that. There have been no changes to the capacity of community resources that would impact their project. We've received 3 public comments for this project. One from Catherine Allor, who believes that additional environmental review is necessary for the project, particularly for any future changes to the project. Megan Boone is concerned about the development-related impacts to the environment, and Pamela Dickerman is concerned about a future project, a car wash, and would like to see more EV infrastructure parking for the village at Grace Crossing. Tonight, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission find the project exempt from further environmental review pursuant to Section 15061B3 of CEQA, which is based specifically on the time extension and not the project at large, which was already reviewed for environmental consistency, and adopt resolution number 2023-20 approving the second 2-year time extension for the village at Grace Crossing based on the recommended findings and the conditions of approval. As always, the Planning Commission has alternatives to consider. If you'd like to continue the public hearing to a date and time certain, you may. The Planning Commission can request additional information from staff or the applicant. You can add or modify the conditions in order to make the findings that are necessary for this time extension, or deny the project on the basis that one or more of the required findings cannot be made. And if you do take action tonight, the appeal period for the project ends December 29th at 5 p.m. I'm here for any questions. We also have our applicant team member, Martin Wood, here for this, if you have any questions.
Martin, do you have a presentation? Green is on.
Yeah, Martin Wood, SCO Plant Engineering. No, I just want to emphasize our clients have made significant efforts out there. If you've driven out there, the amount of infrastructure that's been put in out there, all the roadway improvements, the Townhome Loop Road, significant infrastructure, millions of dollars in upfront infrastructure. 12 townhomes are under construction. Some have recently been completed. The fourplex is due to be completed in February, which will bring 4 of the affordable housing units to C of O and completion for the project. We're basically there for the lofts and some of the other mixed-use type buildings at the north end of the village, which will bring more affordable housing. We've kind of been in this cycle waiting for this extension to bring forth. We've been required to go back to Planning Commission for the hotel component. So we've kind of been in a waiting pattern for the hotel as well as the car wash component based on this extension request. So clients have put in significant effort. They're trying to do right by all the conditions and the original intent of the village and put forth a really good project. And that's really all I want to convey to you guys tonight, and hopefully answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Sammy.
I don't have any questions on this one.
Dave?
Yeah, I have questions about the, it was, what was it, 79 was the condition of approval, Yumi? Can you pull that slide back up? Okay, so new condition 79, all utility agencies with an interest in the easements on the project must consent that that required site improvements will remain in perpetuity. So this is basically going to these utility agency partners and having them say what in layman's terms?
that they will not put any improvements of their own in these easements that will impede the site, required site improvements, so the landscaping in the park.
Do we have an idea of, has this been presented to the utility agencies?
Yes.
Do we have any feedback from them?
For the most part, I believe Martin has said he's received consent from all agencies.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I understand there's a couple projects that are affected by this. I think we were the first one that had to prepare it, so there's no standardized language or this document. So, I mean, we just basically were informed when we put in our extension request that that was new to the development code. So we wrote the proposed language and we submitted it to the town attorney over a couple of weeks, kind of refined some of the language. The feedback, a lot of the agencies, there's kind of trust there, like, okay, what do I got to sign? And they'd sign it, but most of them really don't understand it. They pretty much, most of the response has been, well, hey, is there a problem? Why this has been implemented? Why are we being asked to sign what, we're not going to put a cell tower or something vertical and take somebody's parking. Why are we having to sign this? And we said, well, we're concerned that could happen in the future. That's why it was adopted by the development code. So it's been tough trying to get them to sign. Right now we've got, I think, everybody to sign except for AT&T was the one outlier that kind of rewrote the document with some additional conditions that they wanted signed to sign on there because they didn't quite understand it, so they think there's going to be some cost implication. So I think we've got them basically ready to sign, and Altice said they signed, but we're waiting for the UPS to arrive. So we're almost over the finish line. It's just been unfortunate because we couldn't be heard on our extension request until we were really close to having all the signatures. We couldn't get here in front of you. So anyways, that's a little bit of feedback.
Great, thank you. So what would happen if, for some reason, AT&T decided that they're not signing it?
Then wherever AT&T has an interest in an easement, then we may not be able to move forward with the project as currently.
So what would happen with this project? Houses are out of the ground, permits are pulled, stuff's ready for almost occupancy.
For
And
the
then
most
we've
part,
got this
the-
new condition and one stickler that's a corporate bigwig in, Philadelphia or whatever. They say, well, I'm not doing it.
For the most part, the easements are located within the mixed-use building area, so the northern part of the building, the 5 mixed-use sites. I think it's just the 3 on the northwest side of the project. So those might have to be redesigned, or the easements may need to be abandoned.
Okay, but is there any circumstance when this could critically handicap a project?
Typically, this is intended for brand new projects. This is a unique circumstance where this project has already been designed and approved, but yes, this could potentially change what this project would look like if AT&T decided they did not want to move forward.
So I'm confused on why we need to put, if the applicant's asking for an extension of what they already have, why are there any new rules being put on them at all? If they were changing their project, then I could see instituting new codes, but an extension by definition is extending what they already have. Why is this even here?
Well, the project had a 2-year lifespan, and once it expired,
Which also makes no
they were
sense.
required to come in and essentially renew their application, but under any new changes to our development code or general plan.
Why?
Because if our community has found that there are changes that are necessary to make a project more appropriate for a community, then a new project or a project that is coming in for an extension that has not yet started construction should apply. That's
This
the
one's
intent.
already started.
It's only, the part that's impacted by this has not started. Aside from submitting
And
building
even
permits.
so, again, they're asking for an extension of what they already have. Why would any new conditions be put on it? I'm totally disagree with that whole concept. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, I think we get that. What we're trying to say is that our code currently requires compliance with its current standards. So
you can show me where it says,
We
just
could.
like I asked you.
Sure.
So anybody that's asking for an extension has to move to the new codes. And then a project of this size has the same amount of time as a single-family residence. Does that make any sense to anybody? Because it makes no sense to me. Why would it only be a 2-year permit?
The original application, the applicants could have asked for a phasing plan, but they didn't at the time.
And it's generally just to get their, at least to their foundation, so that it shows that they've made progress. It's not to have it completely finished within the 2 years. We generally have most projects able to do this.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Do we need this condition of approval in this?
Excuse me?
Do we need to have this condition of approval in this extension?
It's a development code requirement in order to.
Staff
make
is
a
saying yes, so they're going to show us what rule makes that determination correct.
So this finding that's in front of you, number 2, the land use permits and approved use are in compliance with the development code, the 2040 general plan, and any applicable specific plan. The development code at the time of application of the
So,
extension.
no, so where's the Truckee law that says number
That's the
2
finding
applies?
That's, which is part of the Truckee development code.
While they're looking that up, Chair,
Yes.
maybe we could explore if there's any other things that we want to deliberate on this item.
Thank you, Dave. Any other comments, questions, thoughts?
Why is this not a staff level approval?
Every time extension requires approval by the original review authority, which is you.
Can they apply for another extension after this?
They have one more 2-year extension they can have.
You think
So
we
20
should be, well, that's a
So,
deliberation.
so we would get, so this goes to 25 and they could do one more to 27. All right?
This is,
This would go to 2025, this extension, and one more to
Well,
2027.
January 1, 2026,
I
right?
do have a clarifying question about those dates. Because in the resolution, the time extension is shown, listed as a period of 2 additional years from the effective date of approval of the first time extension. The effective date or the closing date? Is the effective date the end of the time extension? 'Cause I think this wording just confused me.
so it's the 2-year time extensions are all cumulative from the time of the effective date of the original permit. So it was November 2021 originally. It'll be November 2023 now, which is where we are now. Then November 2025 will be this extension.
2 additional years. Okay.
You're going to finish this whole project in 2 years?
I think we'll have all of our building permits and hopefully the condo plan approves there.
Maybe we should be deliberating when the time comes about whether or not this should be in staff hands for an additional extension after this one.
All right, so while we're waiting for staff to come up with that code or law, I'm going to open to public comment. So if there's anybody in the public that has a comment on this particular item, 6.2, please come to the podium, state your name, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. So now we're open for deliberation. So what do you got for me, Coral?
Is there merit to just including a thing that says if they want to request another time extension, it doesn't have to come back to the planning commission? Even, I don't know if we can do that because we were the original reviewing body.
The planning commission has to be the review body.
That's all I had.
Can we give them a 4-year extension right now?
You can't because we didn't notice it for 4 years and the applicant didn't request it.
Well, there you have it.
Did we just
Is it
learn
the
something?
advantage to be a continuation to include a different application for 4 years?
I think their interest is probably to get it continued right, or to get it an action right.
I think we could probably, if we make a motion and decide that we want to approve this time extension, we could have it noted that the commission, as it sits on the dais, is in favor of giving the applicant more time. And so the next time that it comes up, that would be in their favor.
Included as a recommendation or a consideration or a note?
We could put it in your findings. That's the logical location for it.
And with whatever other new conditions, right, in 2 years?
Did we find that
So,
little law code?
I personally have no reason to see why we wouldn't allow this project to continue for another 2 years.
You making a motion?
I am not, because we're still waiting for staff to come back with us with the language that you've asked for.
The review authority may impose conditions on the approved extension deemed reasonable and necessary to ensure that the approval will remain in compliance with the findings required by this article for the applicable land use permit and to bring the project into compliance with the general plan in this development.
Aren't we the review authority?
We're the review authority.
And it says may.
Yeah.
And be very clear about
I
that.
would
It doesn't
like to
say
see
will,
this.
it says may.
I just feel like the fact that the applicant is coming back for the same project and we are slipping in a condition of approval, it just sets a precedent for any condition of approval to be added. That could be significant. This sounds pretty onerous, even though it's just paperwork, but it could be significant. That could substantially change a project that was previously approved.
I agree.
Otherwise, why don't we go back and review the whole project?
Well, as discussed earlier, we're not discussing the merits of the project, except for 79.
If we don't include the condition, is it then out of compliance with the code?
Yes.
It's out of compliance with the code from today, but it's not out of compliance with the code that it was originally approved under. And that's where I'm
I'd
coming
also
from.
like to note that the finding is that you also need to make sure it's in compliance with the development code. So the two findings that you're required to make for this action includes, they made a good faith effort, which they provided evidence of that, and then the land use permit and approved use are in compliance with this development code.
Wait, so when there's any time extension, the entire project has got to be brought up to whatever the new code is?
Yes.
See, and I don't see that. It says may, it doesn't say will.
That's what I think.
The finding in number 2 is where you would make the findings for in your resolution and how you make your decision for your project, for your denial or approval of the project.
So finding number 2,
Finding number 2 says, aside from the new requirements for easements described in the staff report, that's what it is. No other new changes have been made to the development code that would impact the project. So everyone doing an extension is this with the
Yes.
new general plan?
They
Or the
also
new
are
development code?
burdened by the new 2040 general plan.
I guess it's motivation to get projects done within the 2-year period if possible.
There's a huge
I
project
mean,
that
does
they,
it?
There's
Oh,
no
I
way
know,
during
but I'm
COVID.
just saying. There seems like our hands are tied. In order to keep it in compliance, it has to have this new provision, which they've actually made good progress on. So it doesn't seem as onerous as it could.
so what's finding number 2 again? Could you bring that up, please?
That's on your screen right now under B, findings and decision, number 2.
where's the language for this condition of approval number 79 in the code that this is the new
You're
requirement?
looking at it.
No, that's
this
not.
isn't it.
This
This
isn't
is-
it.
Like
This
the
is
actual
just-
wording
yeah.
requiring that agencies or
B.
easement and
If
whatnot.
you look on your screen on B, this is where.
You make that a little bigger.
I mean, if we have an
Thanks.
issue with this, then this would be like a development code amendment, not something that we could address as part of this project.
Where did this come from? Who wrote this?
Our town attorney. But again, based on conversations with utilities and concerns over infrastructure on projects that might be preempted by utility easements.
And we do have several other projects that have utility easements that cross them that we're working through the same issue right now.
I mean, my concern is that if there's one, like again, AT&T, and not picking on AT&T, but just from the applicant's feedback, that's the only one he doesn't have the consent from. If for some reason, let's say a utility was dysfunctional internally, and this paper were never to be able to get signed, then it hamstrings the project. That's my concern.
Well, it also actually allows an agency to hold a project hostage if they wanted to and require, well, we want to put our cell phone tower up, so therefore we will sign this, but we want this stipulation, whatever it may be.
And it's not common, it doesn't sound like no other jurisdiction does this, I don't think.
This is common, and we were actually probably
Really,
slow to
you didn't
begin.
even have wording for it. How common could it be if you didn't even have wording for it?
I believe our town attorney modeled this after other.
We're talking
ordinances.
about this
Yeah.
requirement. Are you talking about the specific language of like the conditions or what's in the development code?
I'm talking about the specific language that the applicant needs to go to the utilities that have never heard of this before, is what I heard him say. Is that correct?
We were told when we were going to have to comply with this, that this document had never been created with the town and that there was no example or template. So we basically looked at this code section in the development code and we wrote a document. We submitted that to the town reviewed it, they submitted it to Andy Morris. He went through it, made substantive changes and kind of modified a document over 2 or 3 weeks. We got that draft back and then we started basically sending it out to the utility agencies and trying to field the questions, because if you read this, I mean, you can read it 10 times and you still, it's difficult. And their main question, I mean, most of the utility agencies are pretty, easy to work with, and there's some trust there. They don't want to create a problem. They're basically saying, look, if we're being asked to review projects specifically anyways before we sign off on improvement plans, where's the issue? If let's say there's a component in the village and there's 60 parking stalls and AT&T signs off on our plans, they're not going to come in at the 11th hour and say, hey, we're taking 3 of your parking stalls and putting some vertical element. So they were trying to find out what's the problem before they signed it. And then they're going, well, is there some cost implication that we're signing this thing? So that was the reluctance. And again, 3 of them right out of the gate, like, hey, what do you need me to sign? I'll sign it, not worried about it. But some of the other ones that are more Altice and AT&T were the ones that were scrutinizing it and trying to understand it more before they would sign. So my understanding, we work in a lot of different jurisdictions. I've never come across this before, but it's a requirement. We're trying to jump through it, so.
Martin, while you're up there, another question. So it says that the time extension first approved on November 16th, which is extended project approvals until September 23rd. So is that when did you guys submit for the time extension initially, or realize you needed an extension?
Staff might have the date. I think August we submitted for an extension request, or the first week in September.
So that was actually before this document that's October 12th, 2023, and this new language even came about.
Yeah, when we submitted, I think, Yumi, you can correct me, but what was it, within probably the 30 days after the extension request, hey, you're going to be in compliance with everything. There's nothing really, but we've got this new condition of something that we adopted in the development code. So that's when we started trying to solve the problem.
And this was adopted maybe a year ago.
Yeah. But it's going to affect, look, I'm not advocating for all the other projects in town, but anywhere where there's a public utility easement that's already created on a map, developer's going to have to go through this. So it's just something to consider. If it's not a problem, Planning Commission might look at this further for ease of the process, so.
Well, and my original concern was, why are we even instituting new rules on an existing project? Period.
Well, how and when was this adopted?
I'm just going to jump in if that's okay. So something like this has been on the books for a long time. The new wording within the recorded document is from a year ago. But before that, there was a prohibition of required improvements. And my project has this same one, so we'll be talking about it soon. But required improvements is something that can't go away, something that's a condition of approval. Not required improvements are allowed in public utility easements as long as the easement holder signs off on it. So I think the town attorney, had changed the verbiage to make sure that we were getting utilities to say, yes, we understand, we can't rip up this parking lot because maybe we want to rip it up for 3 years to put something in, and we can't have that happen because that's the parking for the project or that's the stormwater drainage for the project. So I think where the wording came in was about a year ago, but the prior code also had information on the same part about required improvements not being in a utility unless the utility holder allowed it.
Okay, so it kind of seems like this specific language is something that we might want to look into, but it seems like for this project time extension, we can't touch it, but maybe we could ask that this language be reconsidered as part of a development code amendment.
I
and we
agree
get to
with you,
see it
Sammy.
again
I
and
think
maybe
you're right.
wordsmith it a little bit. But right now, I feel like we should just move forward with this time extension.
As difficult as AT&T may happen to be on this, it was no surprise. So
Good advice.
Motion, please.
Just want to be sure that when you make the motion, you include the findings that the Planning Commission is okay to approve another time extension to 2027. That's what I heard you say.
condition number 3A, does that refer to condition of approval number
We
1?
could interject. We don't think you guys did public comment on this
Yeah, I
item.
did.
You did?
I did.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
So two.
Thank you,
with
though.
Two modifications. And I use Jenna's wording.
Please.
Can you say it again?
Oh, what I read, that the Planning Commission is okay to approve another time extension to 2027, and that would be included in the findings.
I move.
Thank you.
I move that that we accept resolution number 2023-20 with the following modifications. Condition number 3A, put a number in that first line, and add to the findings that the planning condition encourages, what was the word? We find that we would, another
Makes the
extension.
findings.
You can say support planning.
We would support another time extension. That was my motion.
However, it still has to go through the process, right? Yeah. I need a second, please.
A second.
Chair Claren,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Martin, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Before we move into the next item, I would like to announce that I'm recusing myself.
Thank
Same.
you.
Also recusing myself.
Thank you. And with that, item number 7 on the agenda, public hearings, major review. Item 7.1 is application number 2023-36 DPSP Cold Stream Commercial Development Permit. Chantel, the floor is yours.
Okay, it's Chantal Bernberg here with the Cold Stream Commercial Development Permit Project. This is planning application 2023-36 and our first major item, item 7.1. So the project is located at the entrance to the Cold Stream Cold Stream Plan area. We're going to be talking about the project location as a project area. As you see, there are 2 parcels. We've got our west parcel, which is about 3/4 of an acre, and our east parcel, which is about 1/3 of an acre. The general plan, the land use designation is Plan Community 1, also known as Coldstream Specific Plan. And the zoning is unique to Coldstream. This is MUC, which means Village Mixed Use Commercial. Quickly, here are some adjacent uses. You see we've got a hotel and gas station directly to the north and some multifamily development and single family development to the south. So what's new here is we're talking about a specific plan, not just the development code. And in September 2014, the town council adopted the Coldstream specific plan, certified the EIR, approved zoning map and general plan amendments, and tentative maps for future development of the Coldstream area. Here you can see the plan area. It's bounded by Donner Memorial Park. It goes down here to Union Pacific, to the Boulders, the Deerfield neighborhood up by 80. And this kind of shows you the land use diagram. We're going to be working here in this purple area. This is the mixed use commercial zone district. There's also Village Green residential, Lakeside residential. The fours represent the ponds, so some open space. And then there is also a new park that will be coming online. This is kind of a adaptive reuse or a plan for the Coldstream Quarry. So just a brief highlight on specific plans. Where they fit in is right below our general plan and above our zoning code or our development code. And this is because the specific plan implements our general plan and does that specifically for a geographic area. So this is just for Coldstream. The standards are there, the guidelines are there. So we'll be referencing consistency with the specific plan. Everything, zoning ordinances, public work projects, everything must be consistent with this adopted specific plan. So the project is 2 commercial shell buildings, about 22,000 square feet of commercial development with 2,200 square feet of outdoor dining included in there. Our larger building is the West Building, or Building A. That's the rendering you see up in the corner. That's about 11,000 square feet of retail. This is the building that has the outdoor dining. It's 2 stories and has 2 wings. The East Building is located across Deerfield Drive. It's about 9,000 square feet. It has 3 floors and has some office space on that 3rd floor. It's a shell building, so currently there are 16 tenant spaces, but that could change. Tenants may come in and want to, have a bigger space, a smaller space, or, ask for adjustments. It'll be 80% retail uses, and that we'll talk about a little later. That has to do with the shopping center parking reduction. And they are proposing to have 89 parking spaces. And the land use entitlements requested this evening, development permit, and that has to do with the square footage of floor area and the site disturbance, and a sign plan that kind of comprehensively predicts where the location and other and the size of signage for the multiple tenant site. So starting with the project area, in the MUC zone district, there are no maximums for site coverage or for floor area. Parking is the development code parking standards. 89 spaces are proposed, 88 spaces are required. Snow storage is at 50%. They have a little over 25% on site. So with a condition of approval, they will get up to that 50% number with an off-haul plan. Here are some nice renderings of the building. This is West Building A. You can see here, this is some of the outdoor dining here on the 2nd floor. There's also kind of a passageway to the parking in the rear that has some outdoor dining space available. And here's the rear shot, so you can see the connection has that dining area. The current floor plan, which as I mentioned could change because it is a shell building, shows 8 tenants spread over 2 floors. Tenant number 1 would have, and is kind of planned for a restaurant, is kind of an anchor tenant. They have a main floor and a 2nd floor space. There's the rooftop dining. There's two additional tenants on that top floor, and 5 planner math, 5 more after tenant 1 on the main floor. Here's East Building B. This is our 3-story building. As you see there, the office spaces right now are looked at to be on this 3rd floor. And this is the floor plan. There are 3 tenant spaces on the 1st and 2nd floor and 2 on the top floor. This is a little bit busy, but I was trying to get all the signs in one. but this is a good representation of the sign plan. They are proposing some hanging signs that you can see here. These are the green signs. They're hanging off of the awnings. There are some projecting signage, and those would be on your second story, more kind of pedestrian oriented. So when you walk up, you'll see, you know, what each business is. There are some wall signs in a vertical fashion. These are these blue ones. They have decided on, you know, the cedar, the metal, but the tenant itself will decide what the font is, what the logo is. It'll just fit in that that location and in that space. And their sign plan is completely consistent with our development code. They're not asking for any modifications. So as new tenants come in, as long as they stick to the plan, they should have no problem adding signage. So starting with our general plan, as I mentioned, this was called Plan Community Number 1, PC1. There were a lot of goals and policies written for this. But in 2014, when Town Council and Planning Commission approved the Coldstream specific plan, that really implemented all those goals and policies and kind of brought them to life. So when the Town Council and Planning Commission approved that plan, they had to make findings that it was consistent with the general plan. The back of the Coldstream specific plan has lists of, you know, a table of how it's consistent. So really inherently any project that is consistent with the specific plan would be consistent with the general plan. So we'll spend our time looking at the Coldstream specific plan consistency. The Coldstream plan kind of identifies different things to be consistent with. The permitted uses, so commercial uses are allowed here. Each tenant would come in and either do a zoning clearance, a zoning verification, or if it was a conditionally allowed use in the MUC zone district, would come in for a use permit. As long as those are consistent with MUC, the uses will be consistent, so that's easy. Site design and architectural guidelines. This is a copy of Table 1 in the staff report. There are many project features that meet the specific guidelines. Parking is on-street diagonal, office space on the third story, using the space between Building A's wings and the connection to the parking as outdoor gathering areas. So this is just an example of some of the consistency with their guidelines. As I mentioned, signage is consistent. Snow storage will be consistent with the off-haul plan. Workforce housing is usually talked about during this time, but for the Coldstream specific plan, the workforce housing has already been completed for the whole plan. That's Coldstream Commons, so all the workforce housing has been taken care of. As long as things are consistent with the plan, the workforce housing has been provided. And really the development standards, unlike most of our projects where we have a big chart of floor area and site coverage and setbacks, there's not much there. Really height, the height is consistent, 50 feet or 3.5 stories.
We just lost visuals on our monitors.
Huh. Let's see if we can get some help with that. Yeah, maybe while we wait. Yeah, and that table is in the staff report. It's table 1, so if you have your staff report available, you could take a look. Of course, it's not every single guideline and policy, but an example of how they're meeting these guidelines. And if you can't see the picture, there's some cars. This is parking and loading. So what's interesting in the mixed-use commercial zone district, which is unlike development code standards, parking, on-street parking is allowed to be counted towards your required parking. Usually you have to have that in your parking lot. On-street parking is public. But in the MUC zone district, it is allowed. So there is a mix of on-street and off-street parking. The shopping center, which we spoke about, that is a reduction that can be taken if the project is primarily retail and the project area is tied together with a binding, like a reciprocal easement that allows parking on one lot to be used for parking on another and access. So conditions of approval 34 and 33, they're going to have them maintain an 80% retail floor area between the two projects. They will provide a reciprocal access easement. One other thing to mention is that since some of the parking, Deerfield Drive and Coldstream Road are actually town-maintained parking areas or town-maintained roads. So for parking that's in a town-maintained road, the town requires a hold harmless and maintenance agreement. And that just basically says that the developer will keep the parking striped, they'll remove the snow, they'll hold the town harmless for anything that happens that has to do with their use of that property. Oh, so the easement discussion, here you go. So this is a little different. So, you know, it was kind of hard. It's different with the time extension and things that are already built and planned. But the point of the development code, even before that kind of gobbledygook language with everything that needs to be recorded, is that required items don't go in somebody else's easement, because the thought is that easement holder can remove those items. The easement is their property. You know, many public utility easements are underground, so this isn't a problem. And I'll say we've spoke to the utilities and they're going to all sign off. It's not going to be an issue for this project. But what the intent of the development code is to have you bring your required elements outside of other easements. Don't put required elements there, put not required elements. Put elements that if they are removed, don't change the conditions of approval of a project. So you'll see the easements that are on the vacant sites. This is a public utility easement, and these are drainage easements. The drainage easements are to the benefit of the town. And here are some of the project required improvements that are in there. The drainage easements will be modified or removed by the town and with the developer. The stormwater treatment plan for the project will handle that drainage. So those will just be removed. That'll also fulfill that easement, that need to either change the easement or allow something in perpetuity. The required parking, we need that parking to stay. We need the trash the trash to stay, even if it's on an easement. So the utilities can sign off saying that they will allow those in perpetuity. And that is condition of approval 39. And that'll be something that we'll work through prior to building permit issuance. So staff fully expects to get all those signatures and didn't want to bring this to the commission until we knew for sure that the easement holders would sign off. The applicant did catch one typo in my staff report or in my resolution, and that is that the effective date of approval will be January 2024, not January 2023. So we'll be asking for that change. I'll be making that change. And then we have a couple of engineering conditions of approval that engineering wanted some modifications on, and there's two of them and they're kind of wordy, so I've got two different slides, but I will let the project engineer, Mike Vaughn, discuss these changes.
Basically, we kept the same condition we had in for the stormwater treatment, but there's a portion of Deerfield Drive on the project that presently is not a town maintained road, but is anticipated to one day become a town maintained road when Deerfield Drive gets connected all the way through. So at that time, it will be town right away. And so what we did with this condition modification was to adjust it so that the town water, stormwater, will be separated from the treatment of the on-site water. Just so in the future, we can keep those separate instead of, we try not to have us mix our town stormwater with private stormwater for treatment. So it's basically the conditions are just to allow us during the plan check process to work with the applicant to design the system so we can keep the town's water separate from the private water.
So staff's recommendation this evening is that the commission adopt resolution 2023-19, approving the following actions based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval as modified by the planning commission. So if the planning commission agrees to those three condition of approval modifications, I think that's all we'll need to say. We'd like the planning commission to determine the project to be exempt per the infill development project exemption, approve the development, and approve the sign plan. As always, the commission can take some alternatives. You could choose to continue the public hearing to date and time certain and ask for additional information, add, delete, or modify proposed conditions of approval, deny the project on the basis that the findings cannot be made, or require that the project has additional environmental review. No public comments have been received. And the appeal period for this project would end Friday, December 29th. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Is there an applicant presentation? No? Any questions for staff?
Could I see that modification to condition 20 again? Kind of went by fast.
The modification to that one is just identifying that there'll be 2 operation and maintenance plans for the 2 different stormwater treatment systems, one for the on-site treatment and then one for the public roadway.
Thank you. I just wanted to read it. Thanks.
So do the worlds collide if the private and the public water like join each other? Like, why is that such a big deal? I got confused in that whole concept. So you don't want them to join before they're treated, after they're treated?
Well, it's actually a little bit protection for both entities, a little bit to keep those separate, because if something does happen, say in the town right away, and then it gets mixed in with theirs, it's hard to.
So you're talking about discharge, right?
Yeah, but
So
but
after the
that's one
private
example.
water is discharged, it ends up in the creek, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
So if they meet on their way down,
Well, maybe I should back up a little bit, but also for maintenance wise, the town crew is used to maintaining certain things the way they are. We usually most of our maintenance is at either storm drains or open ditches or basins and other stuff. But on this project, it's going to be put underground in infiltrators. So it makes sense sometimes to keep these things separate so that someone that has to maintain them, they know what their responsibility is to maintain versus being all mixed together. And then if somebody's not maintaining their part, whose responsibility is it to maintain it? The other example I just mentioned was if there was, say, a discharge in the town right away, but then it gets mixed in with the storm water for the other project, then you have both being affected.
well, not to mention, right, if there's a pollutant in one of the discharges, you need to know what it's attributable
Right.
to. I have a question about the language on this. To stormwater generated within the right-of-way that is either treated/attenuated on site or passed through constructed by the project?
Yeah, so if there's a way to keep our water separate through the project and then treat it outside of the project, we can have it be passed through, construct a way to pass it through, and then treat it. There is one other basin in this Coldstream plan that's a little to the east of this property that is some of the other roadway water goes to. If they can somehow get it to that treatment instead of, we would allow it to be passed through without being treated.
So the phrase pass through constructed is stormwater lingo.
Yeah, Becky added.
Is that
Yeah, I
common
mean,
language? Pass through constructed?
Pass through, it would be like the term that is constructed during the
Okay,
project.
Thank you. Okay.
By the project.
Sammy, any questions?
Let's do Coral first, I think.
Coral, any questions? So did I see 15-foot long signs on this? 15-foot long hanging signs?
So our signage ordinance, our sign ordinance allows a square footage of signage per frontage where there's direct access. So I don't think so. Let's see, maybe the example was showing it, but each tenant space has X amount of street frontage or direct frontage, and then that would correlate to 1 square foot.
So
is there a typo or a signage?
I thought I saw 15 feet long, so I just wanted to
there-
check on that.
Well, 15 by 1 would
It's
be
15
15 square feet.
Which is
So-
allowable.
which is allowable, yes.
And there's no length
No, it's a
requirement.
square footage
It's
requirement.
just certainly square footage, that's it.
Yeah. So,
Okay. It's all you, Sammy.
I didn't really have any questions. I think rereading your description, Chantal, of the, I'm going to call it condition of approval 79 from the last one, but of that, I think was actually really helpful in clarifying the intent of that language, for me anyway. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And then I guess the only question I had is just based on, and I guess maybe I need to go back into the Coldstream specific plan to check this, but based on kind of the location and site and proximity to 80 of this area, is the project proposing any additional EV infrastructure above what's required by code, or does the specific plan have any language about that?
The specific plan is from 2014, so I think if it does have any language, I think the state of California has actually brought that up. So I don't know that you guys are planning anything beyond what's, but they're planning what is currently required, which is probably more than what the plan required.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we're going to open up to public comment. So if anybody from the public has a comment on item number 7.1, come up to the podium, state your name. You've got 3 minutes to speak. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Deliberation. I don't think there is any. So a motion would be in order?
My PowerPoint closed, but I'm going to get that motion up for you in just a second.
And I'll make a motion. Adopt resolution 2023-019, approving the following actions based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Do I need to read all of them?
Yes.
As modified by the Planning Commission, 1, determine the project to be exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15332, infill development projects of the CEQA guidelines, and 2, approve the development permit, and 3, approve the sign plan.
Can I have a second?
I will second that.
Chair Claren?
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
And the motion passes unanimously 3-0. Thanks for waiting so long. And Merry Christmas to you all.
Same to you, thanks.
Thank you. Item number 8, staff reports.
Yes, sir. So we've got a full agenda for you in January.
That's what you said about December, you know.
I know. I'm a broken record. We have 2 projects in the Grays Crossing specific plan area. We've got the Village at Grays, the hotel project. That'll be before you for some amendment requests. And then we've got the Village at Grays car wash approval or consideration of an approval. And then we have some development code amendments related to the Red Light Hotel on West River Street. And then we potentially have some development code amendments that are sort of cleanup amendments and some that'll be made in response to state law changes that were signed into law this fall. And that's all we'll have on for that night's agenda.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Okay. Any informational items, number 9 on the agenda? No? Any commission member reports, ladies?
Thank you for sending the link to your land use presentation.
11, adjourn. The next meeting of the Planning Commission, January 16th, 2024, next year. How did that happen so quickly? At 5 p.m. right here at 10183 Truckee Airport Road. Meeting is adjourned.